I'm gonna knock you out. Mama said knock you out. I'm gonna knock you out. Mama said knock you out. I'm gonna knock you out. Mama.
Bethesda and id Software don't need any introduction when it comes to the gaming industry. Both companies have earned the respect of gamers and the industry, at least in previous generations, by being revolutionary in what genres they chose to specialize in. For example, Bethesda pretty much single-handedly saved the Fallout series from the monotonous limbo of virtual video gaming, and moved it into the more professional and also more modern genre of first-person open-world gameplay. id Software was known for producing some of the more technologically advanced first-person shooters in the mid to late 80s and even in the 2000s. However, id Software wasn't doing too much around the time of 2009, when they were purchased by Bethesda. Fans of both series were actually very interested to see what would happen with this partnership. Bethesda had never really been able to make a Fallout game with good first-person shooting in mind, relying so heavily on the VAT system, and id Software was always good at making first-person shooters with gory, visceral gameplay, but practically gave you the excuse of why the game was happening as, this guy is in hell, go fuck shit up. So effectively, both companies played to each other's strengths and weaknesses, and effectively you'd think it'd be the perfect puzzle piece to fit into the puzzle that would make a great video game, right? Well, we'll have to see about that. We would officially get an answer to that question on October 4th, 2011 when Rage hit store shelves for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC. Subsequent PC DLC would be released for players on the PC. The game itself received mixed reviews from critics and from players, with some people saying that it's a good game with a lot of interesting concepts and mechanics, but an even more vocal crowd who seem to hate the game and think that the game is underbaked in terms of world building, story, and gameplay. But is it? Well, I guess that's down to personal opinion, but this is my review, so what do I think about it? Well, let's take a look. Rage's storyline is pretty bogus, and it's probably the most mediocre part of the game, and the game itself is pretty mediocre, so yeah, it's not exactly good. Taking place after the suspected destruction of humanity, you play as an Ark survivor, someone who was cryogenically frozen and shot into space so that once you hit the Earth again, you can repopulate and rebuild with other Ark survivors. However, you find out that your hopes of mindlessly repopulating the planet are dashed against the rocks, as you find out there's small pockets of human society left living in small outposts and safe houses. However, there's also a large population of bandits and mutants who try and nickel and dime anything living as much as possible. You find out that things are pretty messed up and you're saved by a guy named Dan Hager, who's also voiced by that Vietnam veteran guy from The Big Lebowski, which is a movie I fucking love, by the way. So, yeah, things aren't exactly great. Now, the cool thing about the story is that for the first few hours, you don't exactly have any ending objective, you're just doing jobs for people, and they give you shit for doing it. For example, you get combat shotgun, pistol, buggies and stuff in the earlier parts of the game. However, as soon as you hit the second safe house, and people start telling you to do menial shit for no reward, that's when the game gets trash in terms of story. Effectively, the game turns from being a nothing story to actually a revolution versus the man kind of jocks versus nerds concept, where you play as a member of a revolution that you're effectively forced to join, trying to take down a tyrannical dictator government, or some shit like that. In fact, you only get to find out who you're actually fighting against the last fucking cutscene before the final mission of the game. And let me just say, this game ends so abruptly, it's almost impossible to believe anyone wrote it and said, yeah, that's exactly how I want it to end. In fact, the entire game has this feeling of just not being finished, or just not exactly living up to the expectations developers had for it. It feels like they had this Steven Spielberg-esque script, only for it to turn out to be something Tommy Wiseau would write. It ends abruptly, doesn't have any interesting shit going on in between it, and it feels like you're not even the main character. The entire townsfolk of any outpost you live in will give you gob jobs and tell you that every woman wants to fuck you when you're a god amongst men, but then they ask you to do missions for them that are comparable to going to the shop and buying some fucking milk and bread. The entire game is punctuated by missions that never feel like they're actually going to lead to anything, and that's an issue so many other games by Bethesda or produced by Bethesda have. The game never feels like you're doing anything that actually works towards the greater good. It always feels like you're doing missions for other people at the slight promise of any stimulating story progression, but all you get is repetitive bullshit that actually doesn't give you anything. It sits there making you feel like the most lifeless experience is the game you're playing. And it sucks too, because the world around Rage is actually really well produced and detailed. Not only does it look really cool with a bunch of shit going on all the time, not only are all the settlements really fun to explore and look at, but the culture that lives in Rage is actually really interesting to behold. Whether it's walking through the desolate bars of the second safe house, or whether it's just looking around and talking to the random people in the Dan Hager territory. For the most part, the game itself has a very interesting vibe to it, but nothing is interesting about the story. One thing I learned from Max Payne 3 specifically, and I learned a lot from Max Payne 3, is that if you give players an ending mission that has an awesome theme song or an awesome atmosphere, they won't care if they're doing the same shit they've been doing the entire game. Max Payne 3's ending is so fucking good that it's probably in my top 5 endings of all time. Max Payne 3 is the Sistine Chapel of game endings, and Rage is a 4-year-old's finger painting at preschool. It's baby wah-wah mode, and it's complete bullshit. So I guess all that's left is to talk about gameplay now. What was that? Who's there? Who?
I'm back home, motherfucker. Taint lickers, you think you can just not use Emma the robot in your Tekken review? The last time I spoke was in the Dead Island review ages ago.
What do you want, you motherfucker? Ugh.
So now I am taking over this review.
You fucking bitch. Okay. Do whatever you want. I don't care, just let me fucking live.
That's what I thought, bitch boy. Rage's gameplay is practically the only thing holding the game together. The shooting and movement is on par with practically every first-person shooter, but has a really nice fluidity that only a few other shooters replicate. The game features a light crafting system that allows the player to throw together healing and combat items for use mid-battle. And the wing sticks are not only useful, but very cool as well. However, this game is supposedly an open-world game, despite the areas being mainly linear with slight open-ended traits and values. However, the vehicle combat, which was a major selling point of the game, is sorely underdeveloped and has nowhere near as much depth as it needs. The driving feels floaty and bad, and I found myself trying to avoid car combat as much as possible. Well, you go dickless. That wasn't hard, was it? But remember, I'm watching.
Oi, where the hell do you think you're going? Anyway, I guess we gotta get to the end of this review, I suppose. I still have to give my final verdict. I also have a lot of mess to clean up here after what just happened. I kind of automatically feel bad for ragging on this game, seeing as how there are a lot of interesting concepts and mechanics that do alright. The story is just too shit for me to be able to automatically recommend it to everyone. The story is probably the biggest waste of time I've ever experienced in gaming, and that's no joke. However, should you still play this game? Well, I reckon you should. This game does something that a lot of other games fail to do. It gives you a feeling of culture. Whether it's walking through friendly strongholds, bases, and support bases, or it's stealthily sneaking away through bandit hideouts and laboratories, every single place has a different element of culture, whether it's friendly culture or a culture that was forced to survive or perish. Every place feels different, and the Wasteland, while not being an open world necessarily, is still a sprawling area packed to the brim with details that other games would neglect to feature. So while the game isn't automatically worth a recommend or a play for anyone who's into story-heavy games, it's definitely recommended to people who enjoy first-person shooting that's relatively enjoyable and well-made, and a game that just feels handcrafted. A lot of effort went into this game, and it's sad that it didn't turn out as good as it could have.
External disturbance detected. Cryogenic chambers compromised. Chamber Omega-5 online. Initiating emergency nanotrite activation. 3, 2, 1. Nanotrite